I watched my mother-in-law light the candles on my son's first birthday cake. And that's when I saw it. Another child's name written in blue frosting where my baby's name should have been. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. My name is Sarah, and I'm 27 years old. Every morning, I wake up at 5:30 to the sound of my alarm buzzing in the dark, drag myself out of bed, and pull on my scrubs. The navy blue ones with the tiny teddy bears printed on them that the kids in the pediatric ward love. I work as a pediatric nurse at County General Hospital, and most weeks I'm pulling double shifts because my husband Mark and I are saving every penny we can for a house with a backyard where our son Nathan can run and play. Right now, we live in a small two-bedroom apartment on the third floor of a building that's seen better days. The paint peels in the corners of the bathroom. The radiator clanks and hisses all night long like it's angry at us for asking it to work. And our neighbor downstairs plays his television so loud we can hear every word of the evening news through our kitchen floor. But you know what? It's ours. We pay our rent on time, we've made it cozy with secondhand furniture and plants from the farmer's market. And when I unlock that door at the end of a long shift, I feel safe. I feel home. I didn't grow up with much. My parents divorced when I was 8 years old, and after that, it was just my mom raising 3 kids on a waitress salary and whatever child support my dad remembered to send. We ate a lot of spaghetti. We wore hand-me-downs and shopped at thrift stores. Christmas meant one present each, wrapped in newspaper comics because wrapping paper was a luxury. But my mom loved us fiercely, and she taught me something important. Love isn't about what you have. It's about what you give. It's about showing up, even when you're exhausted. It's about making pancakes on Saturday morning, even when the electric bill is overdue, because your kids deserve to feel special. I carried that lesson with me into adulthood. I worked my way through nursing school with scholarships and student loans and shifts at a 24-hour diner where drunk people yelled at me about their eggs. I learned that nothing worth having comes easy, and I was okay with that. I was proud of myself for building something from nothing. When I met Mark 5 years ago at a hospital charity run, I thought I'd found my person. He was kind in a way that felt rare, the kind of man who held doors open for strangers and remembered the names of every nurse and janitor at his office. He was gentle with his words, always putting others first, always seeing the best in people even when they didn't deserve it. We fell in love over coffee dates and long walks and conversations that stretched into the early morning hours. Didn't care that I came from nothing. He said he loved me for who I was, not what I had. When Mark proposed in our tiny apartment with a ring he'd saved 6 months to afford, I cried for an hour straight. Not just because I loved him, but because I thought I was finally getting something I'd dreamed about my whole childhood. A real family. Not just a husband, but a whole support system. Mark's parents, Robert and Patricia, seemed warm at first. They had money. Real money. A beautiful house in the suburbs with a circular driveway and a garden that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Country club memberships. Cars that were always new. Designer clothes. The kind of life I'd only seen in movies. I didn't want their money. I just wanted to belong. I wanted Nathan, the baby I was already pregnant with when we got married, to have what I never did. Grandparents who showed up, who cared, who made him feel like he mattered. I wanted stability. I wanted family dinners and holiday traditions and people who would be there when life got hard. I thought I'd married into that. I thought Robert and Patricia would be the grandparents my son deserved, the family I'd always craved. I was so incredibly wrong. Life before my son Nathan was born felt like a dream I was afraid to wake up from, the kind where everything is soft and golden and you keep pinching yourself to make sure it's real. Mark and I had our routines, Our little rituals that made our cramped apartment feel like the center of the universe. Saturday mornings meant pancakes. Mark would flip them while I made coffee, and we'd eat on our tiny balcony that overlooked the parking lot, pretending we were in Paris instead of watching Mrs. Chen load groceries into her trunk. Evening walks around the neighborhood became our therapy. Our hands linked together as we talked about everything and nothing, planning our future in whispers and dreams. We'd sit on the fire escape on warm nights with a bottle of cheap wine between us, our legs dangling over the edge, and I'd rest my head on his shoulder while we imagined what kind of parents we'd be. Mark wanted to teach our kids to ride bikes and build tree forts. I wanted to read bedtime stories every single night and make homemade Halloween costumes. We promised each other we'd be present, attentive, the kind of parents who showed up to every school play and soccer game, no matter how tired we were. When I got pregnant, I cried happy tears for a week straight. Every time I looked down at my growing belly, every time I felt that first flutter of movement, I felt something I'd never experienced before, a sense of completeness, like all the broken pieces of my childhood were finally being put back together. I was going to give this baby everything I didn't have: stability, two parents who loved each other, holiday traditions that felt like magic instead of obligation. I made lists in a notebook: names we liked, nursery, themes, the values we wanted to instill. I dog-eared parenting books and joined online groups for first-time moms. This baby was going to be so loved, so wanted, so cherished. Mark's parents seemed excited too, at least in the beginning. Patricia called every few days asking about my cravings, whether I was getting enough rest, if I'd thought about pediatricians yet. She offered to buy baby furniture, said she knew a wonderful boutique where we could get a crib and a changing table. Robert joked about teaching his grandson to fish someday, about passing down his collection of old baseball cards. They attended my baby shower at Lisa's apartment, arriving with expensive gifts wrapped in silver paper and elaborate bows, a designer diaper bag I'd never have bought for myself, a cashmere baby blanket so soft it felt like touching a cloud, a wooden rocking horse that probably cost more than our monthly rent. I remember sitting in Lisa's living room, surrounded by friends and coworkers, opening those extravagant gifts from Patricia and Robert, and thinking how incredibly lucky Nathan would be. He'd have grandparents who cared this much, who invested in him, who wanted to be part of his life. He'd have big family gatherings and holiday dinners at that beautiful house in the suburbs. He'd have cousins to play with. Mark's brother David had a son, Brandon, who was just a year older. The boys would grow up together, best friends, partners in crime. I made excuses for the small things that should have been red flags, the tiny moments that made my stomach twist in ways I convinced myself were just pregnancy hormones. Like how Patricia would mention Brandon in almost every single conversation, how smart he was, how advanced, how the pediatrician said he was gifted, how she'd show me dozens of photos of Brandon on her phone, scrolling through them with pride shining in her eyes, but never once asked to see my ultrasound pictures that I kept offering to share. How she'd talk about Brandon's nursery like it was a work of art: the custom mural, the imported furniture, the designer mobile that played Mozart, but would change the subject when I excitedly described the second-hand crib Mark and I had refinished ourselves, painting it white and adding little hand-stenciled stars. I told myself she was just proud of her first grandchild, that there was room in her heart for both boys. I told myself that once Nathan was born, once she could hold him and smell that newborn sweetness and look into his eyes, everything would be equal. Love multiplies, it doesn't divide. That's what all the parenting books said. There was enough love to go around. I wanted so badly to believe it. It was 3 weeks before Nathan's first birthday, when I first felt the cold shift. Like stepping from sunshine into shadow without realizing you'd crossed a threshold. I was at Robert and Patricia's house for Sunday dinner, a tradition Mark had insisted we maintain despite my growing discomfort with these visits. Nathan was on my hip, 11 months old and full of energy, babbling his nonsense language and reaching for everything with his chubby little hands. He was in that beautiful stage where the world was endlessly fascinating. The crystal bowl on the coffee table, the tassels on the throw pillows, the way light reflected off Patricia's wine glass. Patricia was standing in the kitchen, and I'd followed her in to offer help with the salad, trying to be useful, trying to bridge whatever gap I felt widening between us. But she wasn't interested in my help. She was interested in her phone, her face lit up by the screen as she scrolled through what seemed like an endless camera roll. "Look at this," she said, not really to me, more to the universe. "Isn't he brilliant?" She turned the phone toward me, and I watched a video of Brandon taking his first steps. He wobbled across a hardwood floor in what looked like their family room, arms outstretched, David and Jessica cheering in the background. It was sweet. It was a milestone. "That's wonderful," I said genuinely, bouncing Nathan gently as he started to fuss, wanting down to explore. "He's doing great." Patricia replayed the video, her finger tapping the screen to start it over. "David says he's advanced for his age. Most babies don't walk this confidently until 13 or 14 months. Brandon just turned 13 months and look at him. Practically running." She played it a third time, her smile soft and maternal in a way I'd never seen directed at Nathan. I shifted Nathan higher on my hip, feeling the weight of him, the warmth of his little body against mine. "Nathan's been cruising along the furniture too," I offered, trying to share in the grandparent excitement, trying to remind her that she had another grandson who was also hitting milestones. "Just yesterday he walked all the way around the coffee table without holding on. I think he'll be walking independently any day now." She glanced at Nathan briefly, her eyes skimming over him like he was a piece of furniture she'd seen 1,000 times and had stopped noticing. She smiled, that polite, distant smile people give when they're not really seeing you, when they're already thinking about something else. "Mm-hmm," she murmured, non-committal, and turned back to her phone. "Brandon's pediatrician says he's in the 98th percentile for everything: height, weight, cognitive development. David and Jessica are thinking about getting him tested for gifted programs already." The words hung in the air between us, and I felt something crack in my chest. Not anger yet, just a deep, unsettling awareness that I was trying to share my son with someone who had no interest in receiving him. I stood there in her magazine-perfect kitchen with its marble countertops and professional-grade appliances, holding my beautiful boy, and felt invisible. That's when I noticed the refrigerator. It was one of those massive stainless steel models with the double doors and the water dispenser that probably cost as much as a used car. And it was covered, absolutely covered in photos of Brandon. Brandon at the beach, his tiny hands full of sand. Brandon with Santa at some upscale mall, sitting calmly on Santa's lap in a tiny suit. Brandon in a miniature tuxedo at what looked like a wedding, his hair slicked back, looking like a tiny businessman. There must have been 20 photos, maybe more, arranged in a chaotic collage held up by colorful magnets shaped like fruits and vegetables. I scanned that refrigerator door slowly, methodically, looking for what I knew I wouldn't find. There wasn't a single picture of Nathan. Not one. Not from his birth, not from his 6-month photos where he'd worn that little bow tie and grinned his gummy smile, not from the professional shots I'd had taken at 8 months and had specifically printed out copies to give to Patricia and Robert. Nothing. The refrigerator was a shrine to Brandon, a monument to one beloved grandson, and where my son should have been there was just empty stainless steel reflecting back my stunned face. My stomach twisted, a physical sensation like something wringing out my insides. I felt Nathan squirm in my arms, felt his little hand pat my chest, and I held him tighter. Patricia was still scrolling through her phone, completely oblivious to my growing realization, or perhaps perfectly aware and simply indifferent. I should check on Mark, I said quietly, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. I walked out of that kitchen on unsteady legs, my mind racing. Maybe she just hadn't gotten around to printing Nathan's photos yet. Maybe they were still in an envelope somewhere, waiting to be put up. Maybe I was being oversensitive, seeing rejection where there was just oversight. Hormonal even, though Nathan was almost a year old and I couldn't blame postpartum hormones anymore. But that night, lying in bed next to Mark while he slept peacefully, I couldn't shake the image of that refrigerator, a shrine to one grandson, empty space where my son should have been. It played on repeat in my mind like a horror movie I couldn't turn off. And deep in my gut, in that place where mothers know things before their brains catch up, I knew something was very, very wrong. I didn't tell Mark about the refrigerator. How could I? What would I even say that wouldn't sound petty and small? Your mother doesn't put Nathan's pictures up on her fridge? The words sounded ridiculous, even forming in my head, like I was some jealous, insecure daughter-in-law keeping score, manufacturing problems where none existed. Mark would have looked at me with those kind, confused eyes and asked if I was feeling okay, if maybe I was stressed from work, if perhaps I needed to take some time off and rest. Besides, Mark worshipped his parents, not in an unhealthy way, but in the way people do when they've grown up with everything, when love and security and approval have always been abundant, always guaranteed, never something you had to earn or fight for. He'd grown up in that big house with the circular driveway, attended private schools where his biggest worry was whether he'd make varsity soccer, family vacations to Europe every summer, a trust fund set up before he could walk, parents who showed up to every game and concert and graduation with proud smiles and expensive cameras. He couldn't see what I saw because he'd never had to look for the signs of being unwanted. He'd never had to read a room to figure out if he was welcome. He'd never developed that sixth sense that kids from broken homes have, that hypervigilance that tells you when someone's love is conditional, when you're being tolerated instead of treasured. Mark lived in a world where family meant safety, and I couldn't bear to shatter that for him. Not yet. Not over something as seemingly trivial as refrigerator photos. So I swallowed it down. I pushed the image of that shrine to Brandon out of my mind and convinced myself I was imagining things, creating problems where none existed. Patricia was just closer to Brandon because proximity breeds connection. David lived 10 minutes away in a house that was probably just as beautiful as his parents, while we lived across town in our little apartment where the radiator clanked. Of course she saw Brandon more. Of course she had more photos of him. It was geography, not preference. Math, not malice. I threw myself into planning Nathan's first birthday party with an almost manic determination, like if I could just make it perfect enough, everything else would fall into place. I spent hours scrolling through Pinterest, ordering dinosaur decorations because Nathan would squeal and point every time he saw a T-Rex on TV, his little face lighting up with pure joy. I bought green and blue streamers and balloons, found a banner that said "Nathan is one" in big colorful letters. I hand-cut dinosaur shapes out of cardstock for the invitations, writing each one personally with details about the party, the date, the time, how much we'd love for people to celebrate our boy. The cake became my obsession. I spent 3 weekends testing recipes, trying to perfect a vanilla cake that was moist but not too dense, sweet but not cloying. I practiced frosting techniques with YouTube videos playing on my laptop propped on the kitchen counter, teaching myself how to make buttercream smooth, how to pipe borders that didn't look like a child had done them. I wanted something homemade and full of love, something that said, "This child is cherished. This milestone matters. We made this with our own hands because he's worth the effort." But after my third failed attempt, a cake that looked lopsided and amateur despite my best efforts, I was close to tears in our tiny kitchen, frosting in my hair, my back aching from leaning over the counter. That's when Patricia called. Her voice on the phone was crisp, efficient, the tone of someone offering to solve a problem. "Sarah, dear, I've been thinking, why don't I order Nathan's birthday cake from Marcello's? You know, that Italian bakery I've told you about? They're the best in the city. Custom cakes, beautiful designs. It would be one less thing for you to worry about." I almost cried with gratitude right there on the phone. Here was proof that I'd been wrong, that I'd been paranoid and unfair. Patricia wanted to contribute to Nathan's birthday. She wanted to help make it special. She cared. "That would be wonderful," I told her, my voice thick with relief and emotion. "Thank you so much. That's really generous." "Of course," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Just tell me what you'd like. What's the theme?" "Dinosaurs," I said, feeling lighter already, feeling the weight of my suspicions lifting. "And his name is Nathan, Nathan. Maybe they could do some dinosaurs and frosting if that's possible. He loves them so much." "I'll take care of everything," Patricia assured me. "Marcello's does beautiful work. Don't worry about a thing." I thanked her 3 times before we hung up, feeling guilty for every negative thought I'd had about her over the past few weeks. I'd been so unfair, so quick to assume the worst. She was busy, that's all. She had a life, obligations, her own routine. And now here she was, stepping up, offering to provide the centerpiece of Nathan's party from an expensive bakery I could never afford on my own. This was what grandmothers did. This was love. I went to bed that night feeling lighter than I had in weeks, ashamed of my suspicions, determined to be more gracious, more understanding. I'd almost let my own insecurities poison something good. I should have trusted my instincts. The morning of Nathan's birthday, I woke up before my alarm, my body buzzing with nervous excitement that felt like electricity in my veins. This was it. The day I'd been planning for months, the celebration of my baby's first year of life. I slipped out of bed quietly, letting Mark sleep a little longer, and padded into our living room in my pajamas to survey my work from the night before. Our apartment had been transformed. Green and blue streamers twisted from the ceiling corners, creating a canopy effect that made our cramped space feel almost magical. Dinosaur balloons, T-Rexes and Triceratops and pterodactyls bobbed near the ceiling, their strings weighted down with small bags of candy. The banner I'd made, "Nathan is one," hung across the main wall in letters I'd cut out by hand, each one painted and decorated with little dinosaur footprints. I'd pushed our secondhand couch against the wall to make room, borrowed folding chairs from 3 different neighbors, and set up a small gift table covered with a tablecloth I'd found at a thrift store and decorated with dinosaur stickers. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't the kind of party Patricia probably threw for Brandon, with professional caterers and custom decorations and a guest list full of country club friends. But it was filled with love. Every streamer, every balloon, every hand-cut letter represented hours of work, of care, of a mother who wanted her son to feel special on his first birthday. Mark emerged from the bedroom around 7, his hair sticking up in every direction, and stopped in the doorway. "Wow," he said softly, taking it all in. "Sarah, this is amazing." He came over and kissed my forehead, wrapping his arms around me from behind as we stood together looking at the transformed space. "He's going to love it." "I hope so," I whispered, though Nathan was still too young to really remember any of this. But I would remember. I wanted him to grow up seeing photos of this day and know, without question, that he was celebrated. My best friend Lisa arrived early to help, bursting through the door at 9 with a gift bag stuffed with tissue paper and a card that made me laugh out loud. a ridiculous pun about dinosaurs and birthdays that was more for me than for Nathan. She helped me set up the food table, arrange the chairs, test the playlist I'd made. By 2 o'clock, our tiny living room was packed with people. Friends from the hospital, a few neighbors who'd become friends, coworkers who'd watched me go through pregnancy and wanted to celebrate with us. Mark's parents arrived fashionably late, at 2:30, when the party was already in full swing. Patricia appeared in the doorway in a cream pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Every hair in place, her makeup flawless. Robert stood beside her in a golf shirt and expensive watch, looking slightly uncomfortable in our modest apartment like he'd stepped into the wrong building. They didn't bring Nathan a gift wrapped in paper and bows, no bag with tissue paper spilling out. But they did bring the cake. Patricia carried it carefully, holding a large white box from Marcello's with both hands like it was something precious. "We've got the cake," she announced, and several people turned to look, making way for her to bring it to the kitchen counter. "Let me see," I said, practically bouncing with excitement, wiping my hands on my jeans as I rushed over. I'd been imagining this cake for weeks, what design Marcello's had created, how they'd incorporated the dinosaur theme, how beautiful it would look when we brought it out with candles blazing. I reached for the box, wanting to peek inside, wanting to see what she'd chosen, but Patricia pulled it back slightly, just out of my reach, her smile tight and controlled. "Let's wait for the big moment," she said, her voice pleasant but firm, leaving no room for argument. "It'll be more special that way." Something in my chest tightened, a warning bell ringing faintly in the back of my mind. But I was surrounded by guests, by laughter, by the chaos of a toddler birthday party. I nodded, swallowing my curiosity, telling myself she was right. It would be more dramatic, more memorable, to reveal the cake when everyone was gathered around. The party flowed around me like a river, carrying me along. Nathan was the star of the show in his little bow tie and khaki pants, sitting on the floor with his smash cake, a small personal cake I'd made just for him to destroy with his hands. Guests laughed and took photos as he smeared blue frosting all over his face, his hair, his clothes, looking up at us with that proud grin that said he knew he was being hilarious. Mark was next to me, his phone out, taking what must have been 1,000 photos, his face glowing with pride and joy. My mom arrived late from her shift at the diner, still in her uniform, and scooped Nathan up for a kiss despite the frosting. Lisa managed the gift table, making sure I wrote down who gave what. The apartment was warm, too warm with all these bodies packed in, and filled with the sound of conversation and laughter and a playlist of children's songs mixed with pop music. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 90 minutes, it was time for the main event. "Okay, everyone," Mark called out, his voice rising above the chatter. "Time for the big cake." People gathered around, phones out, ready to capture the moment. I dimmed the lights, my heart swelling with gratitude for all these people who'd shown up for Nathan, for us, for this milestone. Patricia moved to the kitchen counter with deliberate slowness, making a show of opening the box. She lifted the lid carefully, her movements precise and practiced, and I held my breath. She reached in and lifted out the cake with both hands. A beautiful two-tier creation decorated with what looked like fondant dinosaurs positioned around the sides. The craftsmanship was incredible, professional. Exactly the kind of quality you'd expect from an expensive bakery like Marcello's. And then I saw the top. The words written in perfect blue script, the letters elegant and carefully piped across the white frosting. "Happy birthday, Brandon." Not Nathan. Brandon. My son's cousin's name, on my son's first birthday cake, at my son's party, in my apartment, surrounded by everyone I loved, everyone who'd come to celebrate Nathan. The room went silent. Someone's phone stopped playing music mid-song. I stared at that cake, at those wrong letters, at the proof that I hadn't imagined anything, that every instinct I'd had, every suspicion I'd pushed down and explained away, had been right all along. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, a rushing sound that drowned out everything else. This wasn't a mistake. This couldn't be a mistake. I'd spelled out Nathan's name on the phone. Nathan. I'd said it clearly, carefully, making sure there was no confusion. And yet, here it was. Another child's name, on my baby's birthday cake, at his first birthday party. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating, broken only by the sound of someone shifting uncomfortably in their folding chair. I could feel every eye in the room on me, on the cake, on Patricia standing there holding it like nothing was wrong. My throat felt tight, my chest constricted, like someone had wrapped bands around my ribs and was pulling them tighter with each passing second. "There's been a mistake," I said quietly, my voice shaking despite my efforts to keep it steady. I was trying to be polite, trying to give her an out, trying to believe this was somehow an innocent error, even though everything inside me was screaming that it wasn't. "That's not Nathan's name on the cake." Patricia didn't even blink. Her face remained perfectly composed, that pleasant social mask she wore so well firmly in place. She looked down at the cake as if noticing the name for the first time. Though I knew. She'd seen it before. "Oh, right," she said, her voice casual, dismissive, like we were discussing something as inconsequential as the weather. "We bought it in bulk with Brandon's cake for next month. The bakery gave us a discount for ordering 2 at once." She looked up at me with that tight smile. "It's the same thing, really. Cake is cake. It's the same thing." Those 4 words hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt my body recoil, felt the impact somewhere deep in my chest where hope had been living. Cake is cake. My son's first birthday, the milestone I'd been planning for months. Staying up late cutting out decorations and testing recipes and making everything perfect with my own hands because I wanted him to feel loved, and his own grandmother couldn't be bothered to get his name right because she'd gotten a bulk discount buying his cake alongside his cousins. "It's not the same thing," I said, and I heard my voice crack, felt the tears threatening at the corners of my eyes. I would not cry, not here, not in front of everyone. "His name is Nathan, not Brandon. Nathan." Robert shifted uncomfortably beside his wife, his face reddening. "Sarah, don't make a scene," he said, his voice low and warning, the tone of someone used to being obeyed. "It's just a cake. Nathan won't even remember this day." But I would remember. I would remember standing in my apartment that I'd decorated with love and hope, surrounded by friends who'd shown up to celebrate my son, staring at a cake with another child's name on it, while my in-laws acted like I was being unreasonable for expecting my own son to matter to them. I would remember that on Nathan's first birthday, his grandparents had announced to a room full of people that he was so insignificant, so unimportant, that they couldn't even be bothered to order him his own cake. Mark stood frozen beside me, his face pale as paper, his mouth slightly open like he was trying to process what was happening, but couldn't quite make his brain work. He looked between me and his mother, confusion and dawning horror warring in his eyes. I wanted him to say something. I needed him to say something. To defend us. To see the cruelty in what they'd done. To choose his son over his parents' convenience. But he just stood there, silent, and that silence felt like its own betrayal. Lisa touched my arm gently. "Sarah," she whispered, concern heavy in her voice. But I couldn't hear her over the roaring in my ears, over the sound of my heart breaking, over the noise of 5 years of small slights and dismissals and rejections finally crystallizing into one undeniable truth. They had never wanted Nathan. They had never seen him as equal to Brandon. And they never would. I looked at Patricia, really looked at her, and saw absolutely nothing in her eyes. No apology, no embarrassment, no recognition that she'd done anything wrong. Just mild annoyance that I was making an issue out of something she considered trivial. She stood there in her expensive pantsuit in my modest apartment, holding a cake with the wrong name on it, and felt nothing. The dam inside me broke. "Get out," I said. My voice was quiet but steady, each word deliberate and clear. Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly. She actually laughed. A short, dismissive sound that made my hands clench into fists at my sides. "Don't be dramatic, Sarah. You're overreacting." I said, "Get out of my house." My voice was louder now, and I didn't care who heard, didn't care about the guests watching with wide eyes. "Get out. Now." The argument that followed shattered something irreparable, like dropping a mirror and watching it splinter into 1,000 pieces that could never be fitted back together. Patricia's mask slipped completely as she stood in my cramped living room, her pleasant social veneer cracking to reveal something cold and ugly underneath. Her voice dropped its false warmth, becoming sharp and cutting, a weapon aimed directly at my heart. "You're being ridiculous over a cake," she said, her lip curling slightly with disdain. "This is exactly why David always said Mark married beneath him. You don't understand how things work in families like ours." The words landed like poison darts, and I heard several people gasp. My mother, still in her diner uniform, stepped closer to me protectively. Lisa's hand tightened on my arm, but I just stood there, letting the truth of what Patricia thought of me wash over me. Beneath him. I'd married beneath him. After 5 years of trying to be good enough, polite enough, accommodating enough, this was what she really thought. Mark finally found his voice, though it came out weak and uncertain. "Mom, that's enough. You need to apologize." But Robert stepped forward, and what he said next, she changed everything. His face was red now, whether from embarrassment or anger I couldn't tell, but his voice was firm and deliberate. "You need to understand something, Sarah. This family has certain standards, certain expectations. Brandon is David's son, David, who took over the family business when Mark decided to pursue his little nonprofit work. David, who's set to inherit everything we've built over 3 generations." He paused, looking at Nathan, my beautiful boy with frosting still on his face, sitting on the floor playing with a balloon, completely oblivious to the adults arguing over his worth. Robert's eyes moved over him like he was calculating something, measuring value, finding him lacking. "Your son," Robert continued, the possessive stinging like a slap. "Well, Mark chose a different path. A noble one, sure, with his charity work and his social justice causes. But not a practical one. Not a path that contributes to the family legacy." The room tilted. This wasn't about a cake. This had never been about a cake. This was about money, about inheritance, about a pecking order that had been established before Nathan was even born. This was about favoritism that ran so deep it had calcified into something cruel and deliberate. Patricia smoothed her pantsuit, a gesture of superiority, of someone who'd said what needed to be said and felt no remorse about it. "We have limited time and resources, Sarah. We can't be expected to treat both grandsons identically when clearly one has a future in this family and the other." She trailed off, but the implication hung in the air like smoke, poisoning everything it touched. One has a future in this family, and the other, my Nathan, my beautiful, innocent boy, didn't. Not because of anything he'd done or failed to do, but because of choices Mark and I had made. Because Mark had followed his heart instead of money. Because I came from nothing and had nothing to offer their dynasty. Because Nathan would never inherit their business empire, would never carry on their legacy of wealth and status and country club memberships. I thought of every Sunday dinner where they'd talked endlessly about Brandon's milestones while glossing over Nathan's. Every holiday where Brandon received elaborate gifts and Nathan got generic cards with $20 bills inside. Every family photo shoot we'd mysteriously not been told about, discovering them later on Patricia's Facebook. Professional portraits of Robert, Patricia, David, Jessica, and Brandon, looking like a picture-perfect family in coordinating outfits. We'd never been invited. Not once. It wasn't personality or proximity or coincidence. It was systematic erasure. They had decided my son didn't count before he was even born, and every action since had been designed to put us in our place, to remind us that we were lesser, that we didn't belong, that we were tolerated but not treasured. Mark's face had gone from pale to red, anger finally breaking through his shock. "What are you saying?" His voice cracked. "Are you seriously telling me you've been treating my son like he's worthless because I didn't want to run your company?" "We're saying," Robert stated firmly, crossing his arms across his chest, "that there's Brandon's side of the family, and then there's your little situation. We'll be civil at gatherings, we'll acknowledge birthdays, but we're not going to pretend they're equal. Brandon is the heir. That comes with priority." They left. The door slammed behind them with a finality that seemed to echo through the entire building, and the silence that followed felt like a grave, heavy and suffocating and full of endings. Our guests shuffled out quietly over the next 20 minutes, murmuring apologies I barely heard, hugging me with pity I didn't want. Their eyes were full of sympathy and secondhand embarrassment, and I couldn't bear to meet any of their gazes. Lisa stayed behind to help clean up, bless her, but even her presence felt distant, like I was watching everything from underwater. I moved through our apartment like a ghost, picking up discarded paper plates smeared with frosting, gathering crumpled napkins and empty cups, my hands working on autopilot while my mind spun in circles. The cake, that horrible cake with the wrong name, still sat on the counter, mocking me with its beautiful fondant dinosaurs and Brandon's name written in perfect script. I couldn't look at it. I couldn't touch it. It sat there like evidence of a crime, proof of everything I'd tried not to see for so long. After everyone was gone, after Lisa had hugged me one last time and whispered, "Call me if you need anything," after I'd put Nathan down in his crib where he fell asleep immediately, exhausted from the excitement and chaos, I found myself sitting on the bathroom floor. I don't remember walking there. I don't remember closing the door. But there I was, my back against the cold tile, my knees pulled up to my chest, and the tears came. They weren't quiet tears. They were the kind that come from somewhere deep and ancient, from the place where every childhood wound lives, where every rejection and abandonment gets stored away in the dark. I cried for the family I thought I'd married into, for the grandmother I'd imagined Nathan would have, someone who'd bake him cookies and brag about his artwork and show up to his school plays. I cried for my son, who would grow up knowing his own grandparents measured his worth in dollar signs and business prospects and found him wanting before he could even walk. I cried for every double shift I'd worked, coming home with aching feet and exhausted bones, trying to save money for a house where Nathan could have a yard to play in. I cried for every time I'd bitten my tongue at Sunday dinners, swallowing my hurt when they talked about Brandon for an hour straight without asking a single question about Nathan. I cried for every sacrifice I'd made, every attempt to prove I was good enough for people who'd never intended to accept me in the first place. The sobs tore through me, violent and painful, my whole body shaking with the force of grief I'd been holding back for months, maybe years. I'd tried so hard. I'd been so careful to be polite, to be gracious, to never complain or demand or make waves. I'd convinced myself that if I was just patient enough, kind enough, understanding enough, they would eventually see Nathan for who he was and love him the way grandparents should. but they didn't want to see him. They'd chosen not to see him. And that realization was devastating in a way I hadn't prepared for. Mark found me there an hour later, still on the floor, my face swollen and blotchy, my eyes burning from crying. He slid down the wall next to me without saying anything, and I saw that his face was wet too, that he'd been crying somewhere else in the apartment, processing his own heartbreak. "I didn't know," he whispered, his voice raw and broken. "Sarah, I swear to God I didn't see it. I didn't know they were doing this." Part of me wanted to rage at him, to scream that he should have seen it, that he should have protected us sooner, that his blindness had cost our son a year of being treated like he didn't matter. But I looked at the devastation in his eyes and knew he was a victim too. Maybe not of the same cruelty, but of the illusion that his parents' love was real, that it wasn't contingent on compliance and utility. I woke up the next morning with a clarity that felt like cold water splashed across my face, sharp and bracing and impossibly clear. The crying was done. The hoping they'd change, the wishing they'd suddenly see Nathan's worth, the fantasy that they'd apologize and everything would be okay, all of it was done. I'd spent too much of my life trying to earn love from people who'd already decided I wasn't worth it, and I was finished. Sunlight streamed through our bedroom window, falling across Mark's sleeping face. He looked exhausted even in sleep, like the revelation of his parents' cruelty had aged him overnight. But I felt strangely energized, like something fundamental had shifted inside me. I wasn't that scared little girl anymore, the one who'd grown up wondering why her father left, who'd learned to make herself small and undemanding so people wouldn't abandon her. I was Nathan's mother, and he deserved better than being anyone's second choice. I got up quietly, checked on Nathan in his crib. He was still sleeping, his little chest rising and falling peacefully. One hand clutched around his favorite stuffed dinosaur, and went to make coffee. By the time Mark emerged from the bedroom an hour later, rumpled and red-eyed, I had a notebook open on the kitchen table, pen in hand, my mind already working through the logistics of what came next. We talked for 3 hours at that table, our coffee going cold and being refilled twice. Mark wanted to call his parents immediately, to demand an apology, to make them understand how much they'd hurt us. He still believed, somewhere deep down, that this could be fixed with the right words, the right conversation. His fundamental worldview, that people who loved you wouldn't deliberately hurt you, was crumbling, and he was scrambling to shore it up. "They're not going to fix it," I said, stirring sugar into my 3rd cup of coffee, my voice calm and certain. "Mark, this is who they are. This isn't a misunderstanding or a miscommunication. They told us exactly who they are yesterday. They told us that Brandon matters and Nathan doesn't, that their love comes with conditions and price tags." His hands were shaking as he held his own mug. "So what do? We protect our son," I said simply. "We set boundaries. We stop showing up to Sunday dinners where Nathan gets ignored. We stop accepting their crumbs and pretending it's a feast. We stop letting them treat us like we should be grateful they acknowledge our existence." I wasn't interested in revenge. Not yet, anyway. I was interested in dignity, in drawing a line in the sand and saying no more, in teaching Nathan, even though he was too young to understand, that his worth wasn't up for debate, that he didn't have to accept scraps from people who should be offering him everything. We drafted a text message together, Mark's fingers hovering over his phone screen, hesitating multiple times before we got the words right. "Mom and Dad, until you can treat Nathan with the same love and respect you show Brandon, you're not welcome in our lives. This isn't negotiable. When you're ready to apologize and make real changes, we can talk. Until then, stay away." Mark's hand shook when he hit send. I watched the message deliver, watched the read receipt appear almost immediately, and felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. The response came within minutes, Paragraphs of justification, accusations that we were being unfair and punishing them over nothing, threats about cutting Mark off from future family events and possibly the will. Robert's words were particularly cutting. "If this is how you want to play it, don't come crying to us when you need help. We're not ATMs for ungrateful children." I watched Mark read the messages, watched the pain flash across his face as each word landed, watched him finally see his parents for who they really were. People whose love had always been transactional, whose affection came with strings attached. "I'm sorry," he said, tears streaming down his face. "God, Sarah, I'm so sorry I didn't protect you both sooner." I took his hand across the table. "You're protecting us now. That's what matters." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't enough. Patricia and Robert were wealthy, connected, used to getting their way. They would wait us out, expecting us to come crawling back when we needed something: money, help, access to their world. They'd underestimated me before, dismissed me as just some poor girl who'd gotten lucky marrying their son. They were about to do it again. I didn't want revenge in the traditional sense. I wasn't interested in hurting them for the sake of hurting them. But I am a deeply practical person, shaped by years of having nothing and learning to protect what little I had. I knew people like Patricia and Robert didn't learn from emotional appeals or heartfelt conversations. They learned from consequences, from losing things they valued, from public embarrassment that damaged the carefully curated image they'd spent decades building. So I started documenting everything with the methodical precision of someone who'd grown up knowing that proof mattered more than truth. Over the next 5 years, I kept a detailed journal, not a diary full of feelings, but a factual record with dates, times, and witnesses. Every birthday invitation for Brandon that arrived at David's house but never came to ours, I noted it. Every holiday card addressed to David's family with professional photos of Robert, Patricia, and Brandon that excluded us entirely, I saved them in a folder. Every Facebook post Patricia made about our precious grandson that featured only Brandon, while Nathan existed in complete digital silence, I took screenshots with timestamps. I printed emails. I saved text messages in a dedicated folder on my phone. When Patricia sent Mark a Christmas card with a check for $50 and a generic "Happy Holidays," while David posted photos of Brandon's extravagant gifts, a bicycle, a gaming system, designer clothes, I documented it. When we ran into them accidentally at a restaurant, and Patricia greeted Brandon with squeals of delight, while barely glancing at Nathan, I wrote down every detail, including the names of mutual friends who witnessed it. Mark thought I was being paranoid at first. "Why are you keeping all this?" he asked one night, watching me date and file another excluded invitation. "We've already cut them off. What's the point?" "Insurance," I said simply. "People like your parents rewrite history. They'll tell everyone we're the difficult ones, that we kept Nathan away from them for no reason. When the time comes, I want proof of exactly what they did." And we built our own life, separate from his parents' money and approval. We scrimped and saved, Mark picking up extra consulting work, me taking on additional shifts despite the exhaustion. 3 years after the birthday cake incident, we bought our small house. Nothing fancy, but it had a backyard where Nathan could play and a kitchen where we ate dinner together every night. We created our own traditions. Saturday morning pancakes evolved into elaborate breakfast competitions where Nathan judged our creations. We started a pizza and movie night every Friday. We took camping trips to state parks instead of European vacations, and Nathan loved every minute. Nathan grew into a bright, funny, fearless 5-year-old who knew nothing about grandparents who'd rejected him. When he asked about Mark's parents, we told him they lived far away and weren't part of our lives, and he accepted it the way children accept everything their parents tell them. He had my mother, who babysat every Tuesday and spoiled him with homemade cookies. He had Lisa as a godmother, who took him to museums and bought him books. He had Mark's college friends who'd become Uncle Dan and Aunt Michelle, who came to his soccer games and birthday parties. He had a family built on choice, not blood, and he was happy. Meanwhile, Mark's relationship with David deteriorated completely. David, ensconced as the golden son and heir to the family business, ran it into the ground with arrogant decisions and risky investments. Robert, too proud to admit his chosen successor was incompetent, kept pouring money into failing ventures, believing that more capital would fix problems that were actually about poor judgment and lack of skill. I heard whispers through mutual friends. The business was struggling, their wealth was shrinking, their reputation in their social circle was cracking as people grew tired of their pretentiousness and obvious favoritism. Patricia's Christmas card list got shorter every year. People talked. Word spread about how they treated one grandson like a prince and the other like he didn't exist. Their church friends, their country club acquaintances, even some family members started pulling away, uncomfortable with the blatant cruelty. Then one day, in late October, Mark's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. 5 years of silence, broken with a single message. Family photo shoot for the holidays next Sunday at 2 p.m. Photographer is expensive and already booked. Be there. Both of you. Wear something nice. No apology for 5 years of absence. No acknowledgement of the birthday cake. The exclusion. The systematic erasure of our son. No, we miss you, or we'd like to meet Nathan properly, or we're sorry for everything. Just an expectation that we'd fall in line because they'd decided to grant us access again, like we should be grateful for the invitation. I read the message over Mark's shoulder and felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. They needed us now. After 5 years of making it clear Nathan didn't matter, they suddenly wanted him in their picture. The question was, why? The text sent a jolt of anger through me that felt like touching a live wire. Mark stared at his phone, then looked at me, his expression unreadable, waiting for my reaction. After 5 years of silence, 5 years of building a life without them, 5 years of healing from their rejection, this was how they chose to reach out. Not with an apology, not with humility, but with a command disguised as an invitation. They want us at a family photo shoot, Mark said quietly, his voice flat. After everything, just like that. I read the message again, studying every word choice, every omission. No, we've missed you terribly. No, we'd love to see Nathan and get to know him. No acknowledgement whatsoever of the pain they'd caused or the years they'd stolen. Just logistics and expectations. They need us, I said, realization dawning. Something's changed. They don't want us. They need us for something. Mark's jaw tightened. He scrolled through his contacts and did something he hadn't done in years. He called David. I watched him pace our living room, his free hand gesturing as he talked, his voice careful and controlled. David was defensive at first. I could hear his raised voice through the phone even from across the room. But Mark pressed, asking direct questions, refusing to accept deflection. The truth spilled out slowly, reluctantly. Robert and Patricia were trying to rehabilitate their image. The business failures, the social isolation, their reputation as cold and difficult, it was all catching up with them. They'd been excluded from key social events, lost standing at the country club, watched their circle of friends shrink to almost nothing. Now they were trying to secure investors for a new venture, something that required them to appear stable, family-oriented, trustworthy. There was a charity gala coming up in December, an important one where potential investors would be watching. They needed to look like loving grandparents, like a united, successful family. They needed Nathan in the picture, literally. They don't want a relationship with him, Mark said after hanging up, his voice hollow with the weight of this confirmation. They want him as a prop, A grandson they can show off to make themselves look good, then ignore again once the photos are taken. I felt the old anger rise up, but this time it was cold and calculating rather than hot and emotional. They'd thrown us away when we had nothing to offer them. They'd made it clear Nathan was worthless to them. Now they wanted us back, because we could be useful. Because including Nathan in their family portrait would help repair the damage they'd done to their own reputation. The audacity was breathtaking. I thought about 5-year-old Nathan, who'd asked me just last week why his friend Jackson had 4 grandparents who came to school events, while he only had Grandma Ruth. I'd changed the subject, distracted him with talk of ice cream, but the question had haunted me for days. He was starting to notice the absence, starting to wonder what was wrong with him that made his father's parents not want to know him. And now they wanted to use him, to pose him in a photograph like a prop, to present him to their social circle as evidence of their good character, only to discard him again once he'd served his purpose. Mark looked at me, waiting for my decision. This was my call. He'd follow whatever path I chose. I could refuse, send back a simple no, and maintain our boundaries. That would be the healthy choice, the one that protected Nathan from further harm. Or I could give them exactly what they deserved. "We're going," I said. And I smiled, though it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who'd learned patience, who'd waited 5 years for the right moment, who'd documented every slight and saved every piece of evidence for exactly this opportunity. "We're going to the photo shoot," I continued, watching Mark's eyes widen with surprise. "And we're going to give them exactly what they asked for." Sunday arrived with bright autumn sunshine streaming through our windows, the kind of crisp October day that makes everything feel sharp and clear. I dressed Nathan in his nicest outfit, the navy button-down shirt and tiny khaki pants I'd bought for his kindergarten graduation photos, paired with the little sneakers that lit up when he walked. He was excited, practically bouncing as I combed his hair, chattering nonstop about meeting Daddy's mommy and daddy for the first time that he could remember. "Will they like me?" he asked, his 5-year-old face so open and hopeful it made my heart ache. "Baby, you are amazing exactly as you are," I told him, kissing his forehead. "And anyone who doesn't see that isn't worth worrying about." We arrived at the photography studio Patricia had rented, an upscale space in the arts district with floor-to-ceiling windows, exposed brick walls, and lighting equipment that probably cost more than our car. Robert and Patricia stood near the white backdrop, and I barely recognized them. They looked older than I remembered, their faces more lined, Robert's hair completely gray now. Their smiles were tight and practiced, the kind you put on for business meetings, not family reunions. Brandon stood between them, now 6 years old, looking bored in his designer outfit. A sweater that probably came from some boutique children's store, pressed pants, shoes so shiny they reflected the studio lights. David and Jessica hovered nearby, Jessica's face pinched with an anxiety I didn't remember from before. "Oh, good, you made it," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false warmth that set my teeth on edge. She looked at Mark, then at me, but her eyes skipped right over Nathan like he was invisible. She didn't bend down to greet him, didn't comment on how much he'd grown, didn't acknowledge him at all. She just gestured vaguely toward the setup. "We're doing family groupings first, then individual shots. The photographer charges by the hour, so we need to be efficient." The photographer, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, started arranging everyone. "Let's start with the grandparents in the center," she suggested, positioning Robert and Patricia on a small bench. "Then we'll have the families on either side." David's family moved to the left, David, Jessica, and Brandon forming a tight cluster. The photographer gestured for us to take the right side, creating a symmetrical composition. Nathan fidgeted next to me, sensing the strange tension in the room, his little hand gripping mine tightly. Then Patricia spoke, her voice artificially bright. Actually, let's have both boys together in the front. Our grandsons. She reached for Nathan's hand to position him next to Brandon, and that's when I made my move. I stepped forward, my voice clear and steady. Actually, Patricia, I have a question first. The room went still. Every eye turned toward me. Patricia looked at me with barely concealed irritation, her hand dropping from Nathan's shoulder. Sarah, we're on a schedule. The photographer's time is expensive. I know, I said calmly. I just want to make sure I understand what we're doing here. You want Nathan in your family photo? Yes, that's why we invited you. Her tone suggested I was being deliberately obtuse. I nodded slowly, like I was considering this carefully. The same Nathan whose first birthday cake you didn't get because you bought one in bulk with Brandon's name on it? That Nathan? The color drained from Patricia's face. The photographer lowered her camera. David and Jessica exchanged confused glances, David's face clouding with suspicion. Mark stood beside me, solid and supportive, his hand finding mine. Sarah, that was 5 years ago. Patricia started, her voice faltering. Right. 5 years. I interrupted, my voice surgical in its precision. 5 birthdays you missed. 5 Christmases where other families got cards and we got nothing. 5 years of Nathan asking why his cousin has grandparents who take him to baseball games and museums while he doesn't. I pulled out my phone, held it up. I have the documentation, by the way. Every invitation we didn't receive. Every family event we weren't told about. Every social media post celebrating our precious grandson that only showed Brandon. 5 years of proof. Robert stepped forward, his face reddening. Now see here. No, you see here, I said, my voice rising slightly but still controlled. You made it clear Nathan didn't matter to you. You told us, in front of a room full of people, that Brandon was the heir and Nathan was just Mark's situation. You erased my son from your lives because he didn't fit your financial plans. I turned to Nathan, who was looking up at me with wide, confused eyes, and my voice softened. Sweetie, these people want you to be in a picture with them, but they're not your family. Family shows up. Family remembers your name. Family doesn't disappear for 5 years and come back when it's convenient. I looked back at Patricia and delivered the line I'd been crafting for 5 years. But you know, what? Sure. We'll take your family photo. Just use Brandon's name for both boys. I paused. Let the words sink in. You said it yourself 5 years ago. It's the same thing. The silence was absolute and devastating. Then came the twist I hadn't planned for, hadn't anticipated, but should have. The photographer started packing up her equipment, her movements deliberate and decisive. Patricia whirled on her. What are you doing? We hired you. The photographer looked at Patricia with something like disgust. I don't work with people who treat their grandchildren like accessories. I have standards, and I have grandchildren of my own. She turned to me, her eyes kind. You're a good mother. Your son is lucky to have you. She walked out, and everything fell apart. David spoke first, his voice shaking with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. Anger, maybe, or betrayal. Is that true? About the birthday cake? He turned to his parents, his face pale. You put my son's name on Nathan's birthday cake? Mark nodded, his voice steady. All of it's true. 5 years of them choosing Brandon over Nathan because I didn't join the family business. 5 years of systematic exclusion. Jessica's face transformed from confusion to fury in seconds. You told us they were too busy to attend family events, she said, her voice rising as she stared at Patricia and Robert. You said Sarah was uncomfortable around us, that she was keeping Nathan away. You made us think they didn't want to be part of the family. The lies unraveled like pulled thread, each revelation leading to another. Every excuse Patricia and Robert had given over the years. Every story they'd spun to paint us as the difficult ones, to justify Nathan's absence from family photos and gatherings. It all collapsed under the weight of truth. David's face grew darker with each revelation, Jessica's angrier. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the folder I'd maintained for 5 years. I have the texts, the emails, the birthday invitations for Brandon that we never received, the family photos we weren't told about. I looked at Patricia and Robert. 5 years of documentation. You didn't count on me being thorough. Robert tried to salvage it, his voice taking on that authoritative tone he probably used in boardrooms. This is ridiculous. We were giving Mark space to live his own life, to make his own choices. You were punishing him for choosing love over money, I interrupted, my voice like ice. And you were punishing Nathan for being born to the wrong son, for not being useful to your legacy. Mark's voice cut through the tension like a blade. I'm done making excuses for you. Sarah was right from the beginning. We don't need you. Nathan doesn't need grandparents who see him as a bargaining chip or a prop for your social rehabilitation. He took Nathan's hand, then mine. We're leaving. As we walked toward the door, I heard it. The sound of David's voice rising, 5 years of enablement finally cracking. How could you do this? How could you treat your own grandson like he was nothing? We didn't stay to hear Patricia's response. Nathan held both our hands as we walked out into the sunshine, asking if we could get ice cream. Absolutely, I said, my voice light for his sake, though my hands were shaking with adrenaline. Behind us, through the studio's windows, I could see the argument escalating. Jessica was crying, David was shouting, and Patricia and Robert stood frozen, their carefully constructed facade crumbling in real time. A week later, Mark's lawyer sent a formal letter documenting the pattern of favoritism and requesting that Robert and Patricia make no further contact unless they were prepared to attend family therapy and make genuine amends. The letter included selected pieces of my documentation, just enough to make clear we had evidence of everything. They never responded. 6 months after that, I heard through mutual friends that the gala had been a disaster. Without the family photo to prove their united front, without the image of loving grandparents they'd needed to project, potential investors had backed out. Robert and Patricia's reputation took another hit when word spread about what had happened at the photo shoot. The photographer had talked, and in their social circle, stories like that traveled fast. The business was eventually sold to pay mounting debts. David and Jessica stopped speaking to Robert and Patricia after discovering years of lies and manipulation. The golden grandson they'd invested everything in became a wedge that destroyed what remained of their family. Nathan, now in first grade, thrived. He played soccer, still loved dinosaurs, and was surrounded by people who chose to be in his life. My mother babysat every Tuesday, making him cookies and teaching him card games. Lisa was his godmother, taking him to science museums and comic book stores. Mark's college friends became Uncle Dan and Aunt Michelle, showing up to every birthday party and soccer game, giving Nathan the extended family he deserved. He had a family that mattered. Not the one written in blood, but the one written in presence, in showing up, in love without conditions. I learned something in those 5 years of silence, something I wish I'd understood sooner, but am grateful I know now. You can't earn love from people who've already decided you're not worth it. No amount of politeness, accommodation, or trying to prove yourself will change their minds. Patricia and Robert didn't reject Nathan because of anything he did or didn't do, any flaw in his character or lack in his personality. They rejected him because of what he represented. A choice that prioritized love over wealth, authenticity over image, being over having. The birthday cake wasn't a mistake. It was never a mistake. It was a message. Delivered with deliberate cruelty, designed to put us in our place and remind us that we didn't matter in their world. And my response, 5 years later, walking out of that photo shoot with my dignity intact and my son's hand in mine, that was my message back. We don't need you. We never did. You need us. And now it's too late. Mark and I are stronger for everything we went through. Our marriage survived because we learned to build our family on choice rather than obligation, on presence rather than blood relation. We learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who refuse to see your worth. Nathan is growing up knowing that his value isn't measured in inheritance or social status or anyone's approval, but in how he treats people when there's nothing to gain from treating them well. I think about that refrigerator door sometimes, the one covered in photos of Brandon with empty space where Nathan should have been. I think about how that single image crystallized everything I'd been trying not to see. And I'm grateful for it now, in a strange way, because it forced me to stop making excuses, stop hoping for change that would never come, and start protecting my son the way he deserved to be protected from the beginning. Sometimes the trash takes itself out. Sometimes you have to take it out yourself. And sometimes justice isn't about revenge. It's about walking away with your head held high and letting people face the consequences of their own cruelty. Patricia and Robert destroyed their own family with their favoritism and greed. I didn't have to do anything except refuse to participate in Nathan's erasure. Blood doesn't make you family. Love does. Presence does. Showing up does. Remembering someone's name on their birthday cake does. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to accept scraps from people who should be offering you a seat at the table. Your worth is not up for negotiation, and your children deserve better than conditional love. Family isn't who shares your DNA, it's who shows up when it matters, who celebrates your milestones, who sees you as essential rather than optional. Don't waste years trying to earn love from people who've already decided you're not worth loving. Protect your children from people who see them as less than. Build your family with people who choose you, not people who tolerate you. And when someone shows you who they are, when they put the wrong name on your child's birthday cake, when they erase your son from their lives, when they treat your family like an afterthought, believe them the first time. The best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or public humiliation. It's building a life so full of genuine love and connection that their absence doesn't leave a hole. It's raising children who know their worth isn't contingent on anyone's approval. It's walking away from toxicity and never looking back, letting people destroy themselves with their own cruelty while you thrive without them. What would you do if you were in her place? Tell us in the comments. Have you ever experienced favoritism or rejection from family members who were supposed to love you unconditionally? Share your story below. Sometimes just knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. And if you're going through something similar right now, know this. It says everything about them and nothing about you. Your worth isn't determined by people who can't see it. Walk away from anyone who makes you feel like you have to earn basic respect and love. You deserve better. Your children deserve better. Thanks for watching, and remember, you're worth showing up for. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories about justice, resilience, and standing up for yourself and the people you love.